It's a pleasure to be here, and I know I've met several of you in the exhibit area, and perhaps, probably not today, but tomorrow, I'll get to see more of you. I'm right around the corner, all the way down towards where you guys went to see the HP Indigo demonstration earlier today. My name is Keith Cutri. As Yoav said, I am the Vice President of Global Business Development for VerifyMe. VerifyMe is based in Rochester, New York, some 24-hour flight from here. I got in last night. I actually thought I was here a day early, no kidding. I thought I came here on Tuesday at 7:20 in the evening, and it turned out, or Monday, and it turned out it was Tuesday. See, I'm already still confused. Turns out I looked at my smartphone when I got here, and it actually was Wednesday, so I actually somehow lost 24 hours out of the whole deal. So here I am this morning, but it's a pleasure to be here. What I'd like to talk about today is some advanced brand protection solutions. Earlier we had a presentation on investigations in regards to HP and some of the things that they did. Just a little background on me. I am a former FBI agent. After getting out of the FBI and entering into private industry, I became the investigations manager, brand protection investigations manager for Xerox Corporation in Rochester, New York. So I did wear that hat, and I know all of the challenges that all of your customers have in regards to how they can actually go find a counterfeiter or a criminal enterprise or a diverter, product diverters, and so on and so forth. And it can be complex. I'm going to try to simplify things for everyone that's in the room today, because most of you are PSPs, print service providers, and you're really trying to sell these solutions to your customers. So the important thing to realize is there are people like me and HP and several of our partner companies that we deal with that you can reach out to get answers to your questions. You don't have to become an expert in this, but you do need to know enough to be able to get your customers interested in the solutions. And one more. Looks like it's not going to work.
I will try to make it work.
I'm going to advance both slides here. So obviously we've heard lots of numbers today as far as what the problem is and what we're actually trying to do for our customers on the HP platforms, particularly the HP Indigo platform in regards to the VerifyMe solution, which I'm going to get into some detail in just a minute. But roughly, you heard HP's problem is about $1 billion on their bottom line. And I think HP is I'm going to get this wrong, but $15 billion company. Any HP people want to? How big is HP now? I put you on the spot, didn't I? Well, roughly that 5 to 7% of the bottom line, that's a pretty good benchmark for all of your customers. Some customers may have a significant larger dent in their bottom line as it relates to counterfeiting and product diversion. Some customers, if they're in the health and beauty industry and they're in the nutraceutical space, perfumes, healthcare, those types of things, they might have more of the diversion space depending on their products and the regions that they're in. And others may have a greater problem as it relates to counterfeiting. So keep both in mind. It's not just counterfeiting that we're dealing with. The product diversion also can be a very large problem for many of your customers that are out there today. And really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make authentication and mass serialization as part of the integration of the packaging. And you heard HP talk about earlier today, one pass, one press. So the easiest way to do that is digitally, and for the VerifyMe solution on the HP Indigo platform, whether it's the Series 3 or the Series 4. And again, one pass, one press to be able to put those authentication marks and the mass serialization on there, both in a visible format as well as a invisible format. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The other thing that we're trying to realize here is we want to make this difficult to replicate. Another thing to keep in mind is not only are the counterfeiters trying to replicate the product itself, the packaging, the labeling, but they're also scouring the labeling to see what countermeasures are also on those substrates. Because if they see UV, if they see any type of tracking, if they see barcodes, QR codes, 2D codes, and the like, most likely they're going to knock those off as well, and they're going to make those as part of the integrated counterfeit package. So we want to make sure that we're able to make that more difficult for the counterfeiters. The diverters, what do the diverters do? Well, they don't want to be caught, right? They're gray marketers. They're trying to take product and buy it at a lower price point in some region of the world, and then they're diverting it to another area or another region or another location in the world where they can increase their margins. That's typically what gray marketers do. Well, they are going to make sure that they can't be caught. And so to do that, if they see tracking codes that are on packaging, the first thing they're going to do is remove them. So any QR codes that are not industry required or regulatory type of codes, batch codes, date and lot codes, etc., that you'll see in the pharmaceutical space, any codes that are not required either by government or the industry, the gray marketers are going to remove them. How do they remove them? There's lots of different ways they can do that, whether they put stickers over the top with aggressive adhesive, so when the brand protection investigators start looking and they peel them up, they can't retrieve the serial numbers. They may use solvents to remove continuous inkjet applied serial numbers and barcodes, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to keep that in mind, is we're not only trying to provide measures for your customers, brand owners, to investigate, but we're also trying to provide countermeasures that are going to be on packaging and labeling and cartons, et cetera, that are going to be very difficult for counterfeiters to replicate and diverters to remove. Okay? So the solutions that we're going to talk about today address most of those requirements. I'm going to walk all the way back over here to change my slide. So this may be, I may have to stay located over here. They tried a Bluetooth device, and by the way, who in the room stole the clicker? You're all serialized because your names are all here. The problem is we don't know who signed out the clicker for the last presentation, but at any rate, that's another investigation to take place later on. So obviously every industry is affected. We've heard this today. Keep that in mind, regardless of what customers you have that you print for and you provide print services to. Small or large, they are going to be affected to a certain extent. So here's a list of several of those types of industries. And again, typically you're going to see the knockoffs and the counterfeiters in maybe the high-end space, but you also see them in the routine types of products that maybe don't cost a lot of money. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Hermes bag or something that's very expensive, a Breitling Swiss watch. It can be something that is very, much less expensive than those items, but they're easy to knock off and they can do them in high volumes. And the likelihood that they're going to be caught might be very low. So because of that low barrier to entry, counterfeiters find that very, very easy to get into as far as their schemes. So the first thing, I just wanted to kind of give you guys kind of the gestalt, the overall view of what brand protection is about, and then we're going to get into the actual solution that we have with VerifyMe. But this is a scorecard that I came up with several years ago, and I usually typically present this when I'm asked to present at brand protection conferences as it relates to investigations. But as you can see here, in this scorecard, along the left-hand column here, there's 5 major categories for a brand protection program. You heard the investigations group talking today in regards to what HP is doing in the space of maybe perhaps enforcement and incident analysis and investigation. He talked about triaging the cases, not going after every single type of case, figuring out where the high-profile cases are, and so on and so forth. But if we back up to the top of these categories, we start with authentication and we start with traceability. That's all of you. All right, those are the solutions that you can provide after you've come to this conference today and you learn all about the different partners that HP has on the HP platforms. The authentication technologies, the serialization. And serialization is different from track and trace. You can provide serialization just by printing serial numbers, whether they're random or whether they're sequential or so on and so forth, whether they're barcoded, whether they're numeric, alphanumeric. That you can do today. Some of your customers may already have track and trace software that can then enable those pre-printed, variable printed marks that you're going to be putting on the packaging, and that's fine. You don't have to sell them the whole ball of wax. All right, so keep that in mind. Track and trace software is the next level up, where you're actually employing the use of the serial numbers and the codes that you're putting on packaging. But as PSP providers, we may just be providing the serial numbers. And oh, by the way, we may not even be generating the serial numbers that we're printing. Our customers may actually be bringing us those serial numbers either in a CSV file, as you heard much earlier today in regards to the HP design software, or they may ask you to generate those serial numbers, whether they're random or sequential. And then, of course, we've learned about tamper-resistant, tamper-evident packaging today, and that's another important feature to have, again, in that first category of, we're dealing with the actual package or the labeling. So I really see you guys as number one. So I don't really need to get into all the details of number two, but I just wanted you to see the list of all the things that, the HP investigation team goes through, what I've gone through at Xerox Corporation as far as finding the criminal enterprises and trying to dismantle these criminal enterprises. And they are criminal enterprises. In the United States, we have a law called the RICO Act. And the RICO Act is racketeering in corrupt organizations, RICO. And the idea there was the United States Congress back in the 70s wanted to go after organized crime. They wanted to go after the mob, particularly in New York City and some of the surrounding areas. So they came up with this RICO Act. And the whole idea of RICO is to identify organizations, which, by the way, is defined as 2 or more people, that are criminally involved in some sort of activity involving 2 or more predicate offenses in an organized way. So again, that can be 2 or more people. Most likely in the world of counterfeiting, in the world of diversion, you're going to have more than 2 people involved. So it can be a serious matter depending on the geography and the countries that you're in and those types of things. A lot of people say, well, diversion, there's nothing against the law with diversion. Yes, there is. That can be considered illegal in many countries. In the United States, the Lanham Act, it's a violation of the Trademark Act if someone takes a package and they remove a code. And that code may be over the top of a trademark. That trademark is part of the identity of your customers. All right, the brand owners that you guys are providing that printed material to. The minute you make that materially different in the way that it looks to other, I'll say, audiences or consumers out there in the marketplace, that can make it a violation of law. So you just have to kind of keep those things into perspective. Being able to identify where the counterfeiting is occurring and where the gray marketing is occurring, they're going to use what you folks are printing. They're going to utilize that. They're going to utilize some of the smart technologies that you may deploy through NFC or RFID. And again, we're all doing the same thing. We're trying to identify what organization, what company, what distributor had that product last, where it moved to, and again, we can do this through serialization, and then ultimately where it ended up. And the authentication portion of that, you want to make sure the codes that you're using to deploy into these investigations are actually legitimate codes. And I'm going to show you how we do that with the dual serialization with the VerifyMe solution. Incident analysis, again, we talked about triaging. You heard about that earlier. Going after the right cases, having the right resources. Limited resources. You're going to find all your customers, whether big or small, HP, Xerox, Kodak. Think of your largest pharmaceutical company. They don't have thousands of investigators out there. They don't have large organizations to go find counterfeiters and diverters. It's usually a very small team, and then they have to deploy third parties when they go after the counterfeiters, and then they're raiding the factories and so on and so forth. So keep that in mind. It's not always going to be a big operation, and usually is not for many of these brands. Enforcement, again, the gentleman just before me talked about that as far as your civil contracts, doing your cease and desist letters, and all the different types of things that companies can do to sort of slap the hand of the diverters, and then ultimately going after raiding and destroying the counterfeit product and the counterfeit factories around the world. And then we talked about a little bit earlier about the criminal prosecutions that can take place as well. So this is serious business. It's not just something that, it's sort of intramurals, right? No, this is actually the real deal. Business metrics being the last element here on the scorecard. This is where we talk about how many raids did we do, how many investigations did we conduct last year. Your customers, all right, the brand owners, how are they using that upsell as far as the techniques and the countermeasures that you're selling to them, because you are going to be upselling all of these different techniques on your labels that you're selling to them. How are they using that, and what kind of results are they getting? That's what their leadership teams are going to be looking for. And when we start to look at the results, when we analyze these brand protection programs, I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but this is another whole presentation and maybe a half a day of describing each of the stages. But basically, stage 0 through stage 3 means you have nothing, or you're all the way up to leading and benchmark in the different categories and the different subcategories that we just talked about on that scorecard. So this could be a sample scorecard for who knows, who, brand protection or I should say brand owner or company. And as you can see, you go down through each of those. They may be stage 0, they may be stage 3, they may be very good at something, or they may not have something at all. And this would be a scorecard where we would go through and we would analyze a brand protection program that your customers may have or may not have. Some of your customers may be stage 0 in everything, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. That may be a constraint due to budgeting, maybe a constraint that they just don't know well enough. And again, these are opportunities for you to bring in some of the techniques that you're going to be learning about today and tomorrow and be able to help your customers deploy maybe from the ground up an authentication and a serialization system to put in place. So when we talk about authentication methods, really I see 3 key areas, and overt, covert, and forensic. The overt is what you see with your eyes, and it's everything including the microtext. And HP may fight me a little bit on this, but you can actually see that line, and with magnification you can tell that the line is actually microtext. That's still an overt technology. Why? Again, the counterfeiters and the diverters are going to get their magnifying glasses out, and they are going to look for microtext. And depending on how difficult it is to magnify that will determine whether it's really overt or covert. In the covert side, we're talking about hidden technologies, and this might be HP UV yellow and blue for providing serialization that might be hidden to the naked eye. Or it might be some technologies such as what VerifyMe has in the IR space or the infrared space. And the difference between IR and UV is really the proliferation of the devices that you can actually see that wavelength with. In the case of UV, and I can put this in everybody's eyes because it's not going to hurt you, but the UV is a known frequency, set of frequencies, and people know how to look for UV. And again, diverters and counterfeiters are going to look for UV on your packaging and labeling that you provide to your customers. Infrared, I'm not going to turn this on and I'm not going to point it at anybody, but that would be a laser technology in a higher spectrum wavelength, different frequency where it's invisible until fluoresced, until the material that's on a label or a package is actually fluoresced with the laser energy. And that brings it to a visible state that you can then identify. I'm going to talk to you in detail about the VerifyMe solution and how we utilize that in combination with some of these other technologies. So VerifyMe, we also take the partner approach like you learned about early this morning with HP. First and foremost, HP Indigo is our biggest partner. VerifyMe and HP Indigo together we're able to deliver what we call our rainbow secure invisible covert authentication ink. And we'll talk about this in just a little bit, but basically we bring the secret sauce to HP. HP manufactures an ink canister that actually has an HP logo on it, and it's called Electro Ink 523. That ink is then loaded into HP Indigo Series 3 and soon Series 4 printers that then you can use to deploy some of these techniques and countermeasures that we'll address here in just a minute. You also heard about Microfocus. Microfocus is also one of our partners, combined with their GPass software, which is the Global Product Authentication Service software, originally developed by HP and then sold to Microfocus a few years ago. We use that software today as the backbone for our cloud-based track and trace solution with the VerifyMe and the VeriPass solution. And we'll talk a little bit about that. This is a GS1 compliant track and trace system. It's something that can either utilize, again, sequential or random serialized numbers in a database that are then deployed and read on packaging and labeling. And these are things that you can deliver today to your customers. You don't have to be experts in the software. don't have to be experts in GS1 or any of the cloud-based technologies that are deployed using this software. The partner companies are there for you, okay? We also teamed up with a company called S1. Does anyone use S1 here in the Asian region or anyone in the audience? What about Michelman? Does anybody buy coatings from Michelman? We've got some people raising their hands. S1 is a provider, a distributor of Michelman products as well as other products that are needed, consumables for customers that have HP Indigo applications that aren't buying pre-coated substrate to print on. So we've teamed up with S1 to provide some global sales and support for our VerifyMe solution as well, since they touch many of the customers that are out there. So we really think that this is a total solution. The Rainbow Secure Covert Ink combined with the VeriPass product authentication service and the global support that we have in play. So we're talking about physical ink, we're talking about overt and covert marks combined together with a cloud-based software track and trace system and the global support.
Today more than ever, brands that create high-demand products, such as cosmetics and pharmaceuticals, need protection against counterfeiters who try to copy their packaging and damage their good name. S1 Labels and Packaging has joined forces with VerifyMe to deliver the Rainbow Secure Marking System, a cutting-edge invisible serialization and authentication marking system paired with a global tracking solution to protect brand owners against counterfeiting and production diversion. Formulated for printing on HP Indigo, the Rainbow Secure Brand Protection Solution provides the highest level of anti-counterfeiting authentication utilizing invisible images, barcodes, serial numbers, or any other designs that a brand can dream up for their labels and packaging. HP Indigo operators use Rainbow Secure in standard HP Indigo ink canisters, so it's easily integrated and printed onto labels or packaging. The ink is invisible until paired with the all-new VeriPass mobile authenticator linked wirelessly to any Android or iOS smartphone. This makes it quick and easy for brand representatives or inspectors to conduct on-the-spot product inspections with instantaneous authentication in the field, including warehouse and distributor audits, brand protection investigations, and customs border and port inspections. Because Rainbow Secure is invisible to the naked eye, even the most sophisticated counterfeiters can't find, copy, or remove the authentication marks, like tracking codes or serial numbers. Plus, it can be used on its own or in combination with visible codes or numbers that are simultaneously printed with normal HP Indigo inks. The Rainbow Secure Invisible Marking Solution can also be paired with VeriPass Track and Trace cloud-based software system to see anywhere in the world that product packaging is checked and verified. To learn more about this powerful brand protection technology, visit us at s1lp.com or call 941-256-7900.
That was a video that S1 put together for us to help give the commercial break, so to speak, for the VerifyMe solution. When we look at the Rainbow Secure Ink, this is the device that we would utilize in an operation where your customer, a brand owner, may actually be teaming up with customs officials at a particular port, and they may run a campaign for a week or two or maybe a month. They'll train them on the use of this device. Basically, it's combined with a smartphone, and the smartphone would have the VeriPass software app loaded up onto it, and then using the optics of the camera system of the phone, and again, this can be a iOS, Apple, or it can be a Android as well. By combining that through a Bluetooth interface with the required lens and the required lighting to read the infrared space, this is the solution that would be utilized for that type of authentication. What we do differently is we do a dual serialization. This is something that you would be printing. You would be printing, if you can see the movement here, an overt code. And again, we know all about the overt codes. We're either using them today or you're learning about them. And then we're also bringing in the covert code. In this case, it would be an infrared in the VeriPass solution. And I will say this, that we have had customers that have asked us to do 3 codes: the overt code, the VeriPass Rainbow Secure code, and they also want the HP either yellow or the HP blue UV. The reason they want the 3 on there is because you want to have a layered solution. The overt code may disappear, as I said earlier, because the diverters will remove that. Counterfeiters will typically copy the overt code because they know what codes are already in play, and so they'll either take a guess at the GS1 randomization, or they'll actually just take a code that's already on a package and they'll just duplicate that over and over and over again. But by having the 3 codes on there, the HP UV yellow or the HP blue UV can be utilized in packaging operations where you've pre-printed the label, and now the label is going into your brand owner's packaging line operation where they then have to add additional information. This is common within the pharmaceutical space where they need to put batch and date and lot codes. And they're going to tell you, no, we can't pre-print, we can't pre-serialize. Yes, they can. They just have to have a way of reading the code once it hits their packaging line operation so that they can then deploy additional codes or batch and date and lot information, maybe additional information they'd put with the GS1 serialization into a knockout area on their packaging line. They may do that through CIJ, they may do that through thermal transfer or any other type of variable print that typically is found in the packaging line operations. So that's where we might use an HP UV yellow or an HP blue. We also may use it in an aggregation area where you aggregate the tops of the codes onto caps, maybe in a bottling operation, and then you want to be able to read that, all the codes in one fell swoop with a vision camera, whether it's a Cognex vision camera, a Keyence camera, and the like. And those are things that UV is very, very good for in those spaces. And the other thing is it gives you a red herring. If the counterfeiters or the diverters do look for the UV, they'll stop there, typically, because they know you've got an overt code and then you've got the UV code. They won't look for, and they may not have the resources to understand that there is an infrared code on there as well, which would be the case in this instance. In addition to the codes, again, we can bring in alphanumeric, we can bring in numeric strings, and with the combination of those two, our VeriPass software will actually read and decode a numeric string as well as an invisible QR code. We're the only provider today that has a device that actually not only fluoresces and shows you the codes that are on packaging, but actually acts on that information and is able to decode it, go through a gateway server, which I'll show you in a second, and then hit the GS1 cloud-based software with that code and then get a verification back. Again, all acting upon the covert code itself. So just a little bit about the VerifyMe solution. We are deployed on the Series 3 HP Indigo. I did have someone came in today asking about the Series 2. We're not on the Series 2. However, HP and VerifyMe are working together to have it certified on the Series 4 platform, and that we hope is going to happen very soon. We've got the go-ahead from HP that that's going to happen. So the idea here is that we're going to provide you a canister that goes into the HP Indigo platform. That canister would be loaded as any other color would be loaded into your platform. Your operators, actually, there's very little training required for this. They're still going to scan the canister as they would any of the other colors that go into the Indigo platform, and they're going to load it into one of the open slots. I believe it's 1, 6, and 7 are the required slots. You can use one of those 3 slots for the Rainbow Secure ink. And then the HP platform knows that code or that ink is in play. And then as you saw earlier, Adobe Illustrator would be utilized for your pre-press operations, and then you would define where you want to have the Rainbow Secure deployed, whether you're using QR codes or 2D codes, alphanumeric, numeric strings, serialization, and the like. All of that would be utilized, it would be designed into the application using Adobe Illustrator and the HP plugin, the HP Design plugin. Again, I think that the gentleman showed you earlier today. That all is done ahead of time. Once everything is up and running and ready to go on the platform, it's again business as usual in a variable print digital environment. You're able to utilize that ink in any manner in which you want. On the client side of that, you would use either an IR pen that we would provide you, or we would provide you with the mobile authenticator with the smartphone for your press operators to actually verify that the codes are being laid down in an appropriate manner. Does anyone have any questions in general on the idea of dual serialization, dual codes, overt, covert, and layering in combinations of those, and anything in regards to the HP platform? All right. Again, HP makes this very, very easy to do because they have standardized on their platform and the different ways in which you can add different colors, and in this case, the Rainbow Secure Authentication ink. This would be an example of, again, I showed you earlier, the device that would be utilized either in the field by your customers and their investigators, or if they train customs officials at different locations around the world and ship these to them and run a campaign for enforcement operations and being able to identify counterfeit operations, this would be something that they would be utilizing. So on the software side, we have a gateway server, and that would be a VeriPass system in play. We use the Microsoft Azure platform, so there is a Blade server in a Microsoft Azure data center somewhere in the world that would be loaded with information in regards to different brand owners' applications, so different labels that they may have in play and the way in which they might be serializing on those different labels. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. And then on the client side of the fence, again, we would have the mobile authenticators, which you would have an app that would be loaded onto the smartphone, again, whether it's Apple or whether it's Droid, and utilizing that platform for doing the actual authentication. As you're doing this authentication, the software is kind of keeping track of all of the activity. What's been scanned, whether there's duplicate scans, which is an indication of a potential counterfeit operation, whether there's bogus codes that are being scanned, again, another indication of having a counterfeit operation in play, or whether there's codes that are being scanned in the wrong location in the world based on the geocache information from the smartphone. So all of those, and that would be an indication of a potential gray market or diversion, parallel importing operation in play. So the idea here is we utilize a gateway server because today we utilize the Microsoft GPass platform, but some customers may already have a track and trace system in place. And in that case, we want to be able to interface to whatever system they may be using. And in fact, there's some of the track and trace partners are here today beyond just the Microsoft Micro Focus platform. And those are the ones that we want to key into. So through an API interface, utilizing the VeriPass gateway server, everything on the client side would still be in play and still be able to be utilized in a different track and trace environment. And there's a plethora of different suppliers out there that do track and trace software. Again, not something that you guys have to become experts in. You have to make a decision as to whether you think you want to sell track and trace solutions to your customers as a sort of a way to increase your margins. Many of the PSPs that I talk to, they don't really want to go near the software. They'd rather have VerifyMe do that, and that's fine. In other instances, some want to increase their profits and move into different areas. In one way would be to bring in a track and trace capability to be able to sell that type of a solution. We're happy to do that as well. The neat thing about this solution is it's all cloud-based. So if you look at the amount of investment that would be required by the typical brand owner they may have, who knows, 50 to 500 different packaging lines around the world. To tool up each line and to put serialization in there, if you don't pre-print and you don't have the labels and the packaging already pre-printed and ready to go, is pretty enormous. And that can be a daunting task to many brand owners out there. We're seeing in the pharmaceutical space where some of the FDA regulations in the United States are coming into play, and in the European Union for authentication, serialization, and tracking. And some of these pharmaceutical companies have found out the hard way, if they do it themselves internally, the cost associated with that, including having line servers and site servers, the software running, the backups required, the vision cameras, and then of course deploying the different types of print applications that would be required. Again, whether they're using variable print through CIJ or other mechanisms on a packaging line. So that's another play for you folks when you look at pre-printing and pre-serializing in a digital environment. Again, one press, one pass. That's an opportunity for you, because you can say, hey, look, we can provide that serialization to you both visibly, invisibly, UV. We can do that in one pass, and we can provide that to you on a per mark cost, and comparing that to what they have to do to ramp up for serialization. That's something that, again, you can probably win that deal just about every time. Also, something to consider is the fact that every mark that you put on a package is capable of having consumer engagement. So consumer engagement is sort of a buzzword that we have seen a lot, but on the consumer side, as long as you have a smartphone and it's capable of scanning a code, and what I mean by that is in the Android space today, it's interesting, Android, you have to have an app to actually read a barcode, right? Whether it's Enigma or some other type of app. Apple's kind of taken it internally, and they've actually made the camera, by just turning on the camera of your smartphone, if you have an Apple device, you can actually just point the camera at a QR code or a 2D code, and it'll actually decode it. And if that includes a URL, like the gentleman talked about earlier, and a serial number, it'll actually go to the website or the web portal and transport any information with it. So kind of an interesting thing. And then Droid is doing the reverse on NFC. So for near field communication, and again, NFC just being another way of deploying serialization or URL information or any type of barcode information in a digital format without having to have a printed, some sort of printed code to scan. Droid has taken the approach where they have that built in now to all the new phones that are coming out now. As long as the NFC feature is on within the software, you can simply take the phone, and as long as you're within maybe an eighth of an inch, quarter of an inch of the substrate where the NFC tag is located with the information, it'll pick it up and read it. And it may go to a website, which then plays a video, or it may take a serial number and go to a website such as the VeriPass system, transport that information for verification, so on and so forth. And NFC on the Apple side is kind of the reverse. You have to have like NFC tools or some other type of software running to provide that capability. So consumer engagement is very capable in the VeriPass system, just as it is on any other type of QR or NFC type of application that we just talked about. This is just an example of the inspector app. And the idea here is, again, not only can we decode a IR printed QR or 2D code, but we can also decode a numeric string, which is very, very unique in the industry today. So the idea here is if an investigator knows where that code is every time, they're able to authenticate on the fly immediately, saving them time, saving them money in the long run when they're doing these types of enforcement operations around the world. Here's just an example, again, of the two-factor authentication or the dual serialization. This is a typical wine bottle. You can see there's a QR code down in the right-hand corner of the label. Again, these are types of labels that all of you could print today, potentially on a Indigo. The idea here is for an investigator that's working for a brand owner or the brand owner themselves, they would first do an overt scan where they would take the device and they would place it over the overt code. They would read that. That would go up to the gateway server knowing what code they've printed, and it would look up the label information for them. And it would actually display a label back to them on the smartphone and tell them, you can't really see it in here, but this actually is telling them exactly where the infrared code would be for them to scan next. So then part two in this two-factor authentication is they would then do the covert scan, knowing where that is now on the label, and then be able to identify whether that's a valid code, a valid label or not. Again, this whole idea of layering, overt and covert. Someone asked this morning when they came to my booth, can you just do the covert code if you know where it is? Yes, there's a way to override the system so you don't have to do the two-factor authentication.
So here we have the beeper. You'll see you press a button, it goes on. Press the button, present it to where the ink is supposed to be present. Nothing happens on this bottle. Present it to this bottle, quickly press it, and it beeps telling us the ink is present and that would be the authentic bottle of wine.
So to simplify things, we do have customers that don't want to get into all the intergalactic stuff on the mobile authenticator and the smartphone, and they want to just be able to authenticate the marks that are on the label themselves. So we came up, this one's actually an updated one, the one in the video there's a little bit older model, but we came up with a pocket authenticator for the VeriPass system, and this allows users to simply go over the substrate, and where the covert mark is located, whether it's numeric strings or alphanumerics or QR codes and the like, it will actually beep and identify that that information is there. It does not utilize the track and trace gateway server, although we have enabled it to have capability to interact with a smartphone in the future should we want to do that. And I realize that the next presenter is the only person between you and dinner. So we're gonna wrap up here. So smartphone consumer engagement. Again, we've talked about that, but the VeriPass solution, by virtue of having the capability of putting these variable codes on there, the variable codes can also have URL information in there, and that's really the key. We see a lot like Nike. Nike utilizes, they call it a Nike Connect. And they can use QR codes on some of their labels. And then Avery Dennison, I don't think they're here, but they're one of the HP partners. Avery Dennison actually has a NFC label that Nike utilizes for some of their technologies. And they have an a Nike Connect label on a lot of the fabric labels, the woven fabric labels that come on some of these, I'll say NFL and NBA jerseys and in different sports around the world. And the idea there is that the consumers that are buying these can scan the code just using their smartphone, and then when I say scan, they just bring it up to it. Through NFC, they're able to read it. It goes to a website. It might play a video of the professional athlete that wears that jersey, that number, or the athletic shoes that they purchased, and so on and so forth. So it's just a way to get more interaction with the customer and the product. And it just brings a level of interest to them, and it's, you know, to a certain extent, it's a little bit of a gadget, but it actually does do a lot for sales. And again, Nike swears by this, so they've been doing quite a bit of that. So, and again, NFC, QR codes, 2D codes, they all can do the very same type of thing as far as transporting a user with a smartphone to a website. It's just a matter of how you skin the cat, how you actually are able to get that substrate into a digital format that then displays something back to you, some information back to you. Now, all of this information, we've talked about scans, we've talked about countermeasures, and we've talked about things that can be done from a print perspective. Well, what does this do for your potential customers? This enables brand owners to then look at all the information that's coming in. You guys have probably heard the term big data and the like. Well, you think about it, if you're able to get, you know, a certain percentage of your consumer population or your users that are buying your product, your customer's product, to scan codes, you're gathering a lot of interesting information. Now, I always tell this story. My wife, she's a Diet Coke drinker. She loves Diet Coke. Once a month, she actually spreads out all her little bottle caps from the twist-offs, and on the inside of those, Coca-Cola puts serial numbers. So she actually logs in with a laptop at the kitchen counter. She'll log into her user account. She'll identify herself to Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola knows where she lives. Coca-Cola knows what products she's buying. And then she will diligently enter in on the keyboard all the serial numbers of all the bottle caps, of which then Coca-Cola will mail her a coupon, and I have no idea what she gets out of this. I think maybe a free can of Coke or something. It's ridiculous. But she goes through all of that because she's just used to getting coupons. Well, you can do the same thing in incenting consumers to scan codes on the labels themselves. But that information, what are they getting out of it? What does Coca-Cola get out? They got the location, they got your address, they know who you are, they know where you shop, and they know exactly what serial numbers, what date, batch, lot code, everything that they have in their entire ecosystem for selling product to the world, they now have that in their database. So the VeriPass solution, same thing. Again, with the cloud-based software that we deployed today, your customers, the brand owners, once deployed, once these codes are out there, they're able to gather an enormous amount of detail that they never would have had before in regards to their consumers, provided that the consumers and the users of that product are scanning those codes. And again, that's a challenge in itself. I know here in Asia and in China, scanning codes is actually pretty routine. Kind of the opposite in the United States, not so much. And again, it's just a matter of the culture and how things are marketed to the consumer, how they're able to utilize that information. So the other piece of information from an enforcement perspective that they get out of all this, and I'm almost done, is the ability to have a heat map and the ability to generate leads, investigative leads. And you heard the gentleman before from HP who loses $1 billion a year on counterfeiting and probably diversion combined. This type of solution with VerifyMe, with the VeriPass software, will allow your customers, your brand owners, to identify areas in the world where they have a problem, okay, where they may have criminal enterprises that are engaging in counterfeiting or product diversion that needs to be looked into. So the ability to be able to triage these different cases is based on how much data you have to gather and how you can then determine which cases you're going to go after and which areas of the world you're going to look for these problems. So by having a track and trace, I'll call it a heat map. And again, this is just a very small one. You may have a very complex one where everywhere your product has been scanned, your customers' products have been scanned, will show up on a heat map if it's a duplicate code, if it's a code that's in the wrong universe, the wrong location, or if it's a code that's bogus. It's not a good code at all. All that information, again, can be stack ranked and can be organized so that these brand protection investigators, and again, you heard how HP does it, and that's not very different than how Xerox does it in Rochester, New York, and around the world, and how I did it when I ran their organization. And it's not any different than most companies that know about brand protection. It's not any different on how they might do something. So, important to realize that you are enabling your customers to get to this end result. That's the what we call the end zone, okay, in NFL football terms. You're enabling your customers to be able to generate some data that will allow them to affect the bottom line of their revenue stream and of their distribution supply chain. Okay. So how do we get VerifyMe? VerifyMe, again, you can call me. You've got my phone number, and it's in the beginning. It'll be at the end of the slide here. You can write that down. You can send me an email. We are delivering this through S1. For the Asian regions of the world, it'll be coming out of the Netherlands, and you would have this direct ship to your location. The canisters, there's a fixed cost on the canisters, and then there's a licensing fee per use. We can talk about pricing if you email me. I've already had some folks show up in the exhibit area, and they're interested in this and want to know about that. So we can, in the United States, again, through S1, the shipping would be done in the United States as well. And South America and Brazil are coming. We're just looking at setting up someone in Brazil that's actually going to distribute these canisters. And again, the canisters are actually, to our specifications with our secret sauce, manufactured by HP Indigo, okay, out of Israel. But the distribution chain is done again through our partners here. All right. I am going to ask if there's any questions. Anyone have any burning questions in the audience before we move on to the next presenter? All right. Well, thank you very, very much for your attention. I appreciate that. And have a good dinner tonight, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Keith, thank you.